Hello, my beautiful watchers, and welcome to my desperately trying to put off having to start the 50 Shades episodes Q&A! Yay! A huge thank you to all my patrons for providing questions here. I just want to warn you guys that this is going to be completely unscripted, which is something I almost never do, because I'm a little bit convinced it's going to be completely rambly and really boring, and you're all going to deeply regret your decision to watch it. So, yeah, let's jump into that, shall we?
Do you have, or have you had, any pets?
I had Petrie. I still have him, technically. He's back in the UK with my parents. When I moved to America, the vet said he was too old to travel, so he had to stay with my parents, unfortunately. But now I've got Terry here, and he's very cool, and I love him very much. I mean, he doesn't like being held like this, I don't think. You want out? Okay, we're cool, buddy. And there's Wisp here, who he's about the same age as Sir Terry, but he's a lot smaller. He's my little panther. And he also doesn't like being held like this, but he puts up with it sometimes. Not all the time. Sometimes. Are you good? We cool, you and I?
How much of a Patreon pledge do I have to make a month in order for you to leave me alone?
Infinity dollars, because that's how much our friendship is worth, Luke.
Are you still doing the Dom Reviews You series?
I am, yeah. I couldn't exactly say when, because I don't schedule that sort of thing. I just fit it in when I have a free moment, and that is becoming increasingly rare these days, but I will come back to it eventually, I promise.
Are there some things that still surprise you or confuse you about the USA now that you've lived in the US for a while? If so, what?
I wouldn't say it surprises me as such, but I am constantly perplexed about why stores don't include sales tax on the price tag of the item. It's like, why wouldn't you want things to say how much they're going to cost so people can budget their money properly, like every other frickin' country in the world? I don't know if it's just to make things seem slightly cheaper, but yeah, that annoys me somewhat.
What has been your most challenging and most rewarding Lost in Adaptation episode in 2018?
Depending on what you mean by rewarding, I'd say that both answers are probably the first 50 Shades of Grey episode, because it was most challenging firstly getting through that wretched book, and secondly because I ended up doing 3 episodes instead of 1 like I originally intended, because I couldn't do the Lost in Adaptation because I kept stopping to rant about how horrible the book was, so I thought, okay, in order to be able to do this Lost in Adaptation, I'm going to have to do a book review first so I can get it all out of my system. Then, when I was trying to write the book review, I realized I was spending too long trying to explain the context, because I knew no one else will have read this book. So I realized I was going to have to do a plot synopsis video first. So not only did I do 3 videos, I also worked my way backwards and was really frustrated until I realized that I had to do all 3 of those things. But of course the payoff for that was I gained like more subscribers through that one, like just through 50 Shades, than I did through the entire Harry Potter-a-thon. So channel-wise, that was both the most challenging and most rewarding. Another one that was difficult to work on was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, simply because that was the one that I had to come up with the in-name only clause for, because I kept going back and rewriting the script and going back and rewriting the script, trying to figure out how I was going to handle this subject when there was so little in common between the book and the film. So that one, that was pretty challenging, and like the ones I've enjoyed the most were probably the ones I worked in the most silly sketches in. I know not everyone appreciates those, but so things like Rebecca was oddly rewarding to work on, because even though it wasn't a hugely popular film or book, I had a lot of fun making it, and I'm glad a surprising amount of people liked it.
Hey, when are you going to review the last 50 Shades book and movie? JK. Do you have any favorite manga or anime besides Death Note? I sent you guys some Ruby notebooks.
I'm working on it, don't rush me. Anime-wise, I think I'm probably one of those anime fans that annoy more sort of hardcore anime fans, because I tend to like some of the more mainstream stuff. Like when I was a teenager in like early 20s, I was quite into Naruto and Bleach. I stopped watching both before supposedly they got bad, so I still have fond memories of them. At the moment, I really like My Hero Academia, and I also like Food Wars, but I feel like, I don't like the rapey overtones of the first couple of episodes. I'm glad they played that down. It's still an incredibly sexual show, but what do you expect from an anime that was made by someone who exclusively made hentai until that point? What were we talking about again? Oh, I do also like Ruby. I was very sad to hear about one of the writers passing.
How would you treat a book that uses weird, postmodern techniques that can't be translated into film? For example, books like American Psycho, Slaughterhouse-Five, and The Name of the Rose all contain elements and techniques that are either impossible to translate into film or would make the film borderline unwatchable. Would that count against it adaptation-wise?
I don't want to make a sweeping statement about all of those, especially not the examples you mentioned. I think I would have to treat it on a case-by-case basis if and when I come to those as an Lost in Adaptation episode. I would certainly take it into account, because yes, there are certain ways of writing a book that make it harder to adapt than others, but on the other hand, whoever made the film will have known that going in, so we'll see, I guess. Sorry, I can't really think of anything more constructive to say now.
Where do you usually go for good book recommendations?
I mean, for the last 4 years or so, I've strictly been doing Lost in Adaptation books, because this job leaves very little time for personal reading. Before then, this is going to sound really sad, but I used to go to my dad for most book recommendations, because me and him have really similar tastes in books, and he has like a massive library back at his place in the UK, which I used to go and pilfer books from all the time. So even when I moved away from home, occasionally I'd message him to say, "Hey Dad, you reading any good books recently? Anything you can recommend?" So that's how I discovered a lot of my favourite series.
Of previous Lost in Adaptations, which are you most proud of, and which would you tell your past self to do differently? How would you tell that past self very briefly what to do differently, ignoring temporal mechanics?
Most proud of is a bit tricky because I am super critical of my old work. Like, a couple of weeks, maybe a month tops, after posting any given episode, I'll find it massively unwatchable because I'll see everything I could have done better and all the little mistakes that I made. So I finding one that I can go back on and watch now that I'm hugely proud of is quite tricky. There's some that I like more than others, and if anyone asks me, hey Don, which episode should I start with? I could probably pick out a reasonably good one, but I wouldn't say I'm like super proud of any of them, if I'm honest. Don't feel bad for me about that. I feel it's something that helps me strive for improvement constantly, so it's kind of essential to my working process, as mean as it is. As for your time travel scenario, if I could go back and talk to myself about Starship Troopers, the very first Lost in Adaptation that I ever did, I would, because that was my pilot episode, and I hadn't quite figured out what I wanted to do with Lost in Adaptation at that point. I was the mindset I was working with was I wanted to find films that were based on fairly obscure books that hadn't been read by a lot of people, and just talk about, oh look at this interesting tidbit from the book, they didn't put this in the film. I didn't plan to go into stuff like what the filmmaker's motivations were for changing certain things, or what consequences the changes had on the film as a result. And with Starship Troopers in particular, the filmmaker's motivations are essential to understanding the adaptation, because the book was written by someone who was very right-wing, and the film was not. And the guy who made the film has gone on the record saying that he was basically making fun of the book with the film. And I didn't pick up on that at all. I didn't write about that at all in my episode, so I felt that was a huge missed opportunity. So I've tried to avoid going back and redoing old episodes, because I think that's a slippery slope to just constantly remaking the same 20 episodes over and over and over again, as I notice more and more mistakes that I made each time. But if I was going to reboot any episode I've done, it would be Starship Troopers, so we'll see about that.
What are your favorite genres of books and films? Also, what are your thoughts on certain genres being better in written form and others being better in visual form?
Science fiction is usually my favourite genre, pretty much across the board, films, books, video games, anything really. As for the second thing, I don't think that I would agree that there is any given genre that you can unequivocally say is better in either particular format. There's obviously certain things that would make it easier to work in written form, like quite grandiose things, like science fiction and high fantasy, where you're talking about massive fleets of spaceships or huge armies or mountains that are also fortresses, because that takes a lot of money and effort to turn into film, or to make real in film. But that's not quite the same thing as it being unequivocally better in written form. So there's going to be stories that favour one over the other, but I wouldn't be willing to say there's any genre that is definitely better in one or the other.
I heard that because of Japanese copyright laws, you cannot make episodes with any Japanese content, not just anime. Are there any other countries with strict copyright laws that we should be aware of when making a request?
I'm not actually sure. It hasn't come up yet. Fair use is an American law, so presumably anything that's not American produced would have this issue unless the country in particular has an equivalent law, but I've not researched all around the world for this yet, so I would say if you can, and you are making a request, aim for something that was produced in the USA. Because otherwise that could potentially cause trouble for me, but if there's something foreign that someone really has their heart set on, I'm not going to say no until I know that there is actually a problem with it. So I really didn't want to have to say no Japanese movies, but they are just impossible to work with because you can't argue with a Japanese company because they don't have any sort of stipulation in their laws that says I have any right to do what I do with them. So, am I really rambling? It feels like I'm really rambling on this video. I'm so sorry.
What is your favorite TV show?
You know, I notoriously have trouble answering questions like that, whether it's for TV shows, books, or movies, because my favorite is constantly shifting depending on how recently I've seen something, my taste at the time, stuff like that. So I usually have to give like a top 5 in any given category. So the one that springs most readily to mind is probably Red Dwarf, because that's one of my favorite comedies and it meant a lot to me growing up and it's the kind of thing I like to come back to a lot. I'm obviously tempted to say like the early seasons of Game of Thrones because I was very, very fond of those. That's why it was so heartbreaking that it went so downhill later.
What do you think is the best and worst after released information Rowling has announced about the Harry Potter world?
I know there's a death of the author question coming up soon, so I won't get too bogged down in that philosophy right now, and I would also like to say, for the record, that I don't necessarily hold J.K. Rowling personally responsible for everything that's coming out of Pottermore these days, because I'm of the opinion it's a bit childish to believe that any one person could possibly still be that much in charge of a franchise that's become as big as the Harry Potter franchise has. Even someone as influential as J.K. Rowling has been couldn't possibly be calling all the shots at this point, so it's possibly a little unfair to lay the blame of everything on her. But that said, the obvious answer to your question is the recent revelation that up until, the 19th century, all of the Hogwarts students were unable to access bathrooms because they hadn't been invented yet and just relieved themselves wherever they happened to be standing. Like, that's literally the words they use. Wherever they happen to be, they just hitch up their robes and take a big shit on the floor and then use magic to erase it. Like, corridors, classrooms, people's bedrooms. How? Why? No. No! What?
If you could keep any animal, real or imagined, that you wanted, what would it be?
Okay, well, who could possibly think of anything other than a sapient dragon that you can communicate with psychically and ride around on when asked that question? Come on. And for the record, I'm thinking of the Pern novels, not Aragon.
Was there any adapted movie you liked so much that you were scared to read the book because it might be a terrible adaptation and sour the experience?
Yes, that was my exact thoughts when I went into Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, because I was a big fan of the movie, and I knew that reading the comics was going to make me like the film less. And I mean, I think I made it clear in those episodes that it didn't completely ruin it for me. I still like the film, but yes, I did see how much better it could have been, or how much better it was in the comics. So what I was afraid of did come to pass, but it wasn't so bad in the end.
Will we ever see videos on the rest of The Prisoner?
Short answer, no. I don't plan to go back to doing the retrospective I was doing, the episode by episode thing, because partly because they just weren't pulling in the numbers I would need to justify making those episodes anymore, and partly because I still don't feel like I can do it justice, because there's a lot of subtext to The Prisoners, a lot of allegory and metaphor that just goes completely over my head because I don't think in allegory. I'm not like a film theorist or a film reviewer that way. So if I was going to come back to it, I'd probably do the entire series in a single episode, and I would also probably recruit the help of someone who's a bit more learned in that area, so to make up for what I see as my shortcomings of it. So I'm not saying I'll never come back to The Prisoner in general, but no, I'm not going to continue doing the series I was doing before, sorry.
Why hasn't E.L. James been arrested? These books should be justified in her imprisonment for potentially inciting harm to people.
You got me. I mean, in all seriousness, obviously that would be overkill, but it does bother me that she has been so rewarded for spewing so much vileness into the world, but, that's just the reality we live in sometimes. Being a horrible person is rewarded.
Why are you a coward who daren't tackle FSF like a man? I would like to state for the record, this was a joke. What book/game, etc. would you personally like to see made into a movie? And what part of it would you most fear being butchered mid-adaptation?
I'd actually say the Miles Vorkosigan novels by Lois McMaster Berjold. I'm probably saying her surname very wrong there. The character means a lot to me for reasons I won't go into right now, so yeah, I would be super, super nervous about what the end result would be, because if it was crap, it would kind of break my fanboy heart a little bit.
Question for Terrance. When you review things Harry Potter related, excluding Cursed Child, as I doubt even you could time travel that far into the future, no matter how amazing you are, how much do you actually know from back in your Hogwarts days, / the history books, and how much is new to you? As in, I'd imagine Grindelwald is a topic in wizarding history books. It's just that I'd imagine you would know most of the Harry Potter stuff from your school days. Thanks. Keep up being the best Ravenclaw around.
Well, the thing you have to remember about the Harry Potter books is they are, first and foremost, about Harry Potter. It's Harry's journey, it's Harry's thought process, Harry's development, so everything that was internal to his mind, and anything that went on in, like, the Gryffindor common room, where Ravenclaws weren't allowed, is news to me when I was reading them. It almost felt kind of invasive reading about it, now that I think about it. I should probably apologise to him at some point.
Have you read any Australian books or seen any Australian movies? If so, which ones?
Books? I don't think so. Films? I've seen a few, like, American films that are set in Australia. But now that I think about it, I'm not sure I've ever seen any actual Australian productions. Closest thing is probably like a TV show like Farscape, because that was predominantly an Australian production, right? Anyone else remember Farscape? Am I old? I'm probably old.
Good evening, the Dom. My question regards your other personas, namely Reginald, Terrance, and now Nega the Dom. What's it like living with so many personas like that? How hectic is it and all that jazz?
It's not so bad. The Negadom doesn't speak, so he just sort of sits in the corner glowering at people. The two future versions of me tend to keep to themselves as well, quite a lot. They're just off sort of trying to plan for the future when it eventually arrives and making doomsday predictions, so that's always a fun evening. Terrance is, of course, a massive pain in the ass. You have no idea how long he spends in the bathroom every day. He's basically like Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, but even more douchey.
How do you feel about the death of the author?
And here it is. This answer may be slightly annoyingly middle ground for some people, but I don't think there's any wrong answers here. Everyone's opinion on death of the author is correct as far as I'm concerned. It's not only something that should be decided per person, it's also perfectly legitimate to have different opinions depending on the author, because it can depend very much on them as much as anything else. Like, everyone's really keen to talk about George Lucas and J.K. Rowling's examples why people's work should possibly not be constantly revisited, because it keeps getting worse and worse, but people seem to forget that, like, Tolkien was super into adding to his lore post hoc. Like, The Hobbit changed drastically with every rewrite that he did. Like, there was published versions of The Hobbit where Gollum was fairly friendly and didn't give a the ring was something he was going to willingly give away, which would have completely screwed over the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So it depends on how you feel, it depends on how trustworthy the author is, how good they are at working with it. So yeah, there really is no wrong answer here as far as I'm concerned.
Would you ever consider reviewing and comparing the rest of the Fleming Bond books and their respective films? I've recently been listening to the audiobooks. While the ones I finished are also plagued with overly descriptive sections and casual attitudes that aren't shared today, i.e. misogyny and racism, they are quite enjoyable, and some have interesting differences to the films that I would be interested to hear your opinions on.
The answer to this, and all other Are You Going to Review X questions, is going to be if you are willing to pay for it. All my Lost in Adaptations episodes from 50 Shades of Grey going onwards for the foreseeable future are going to be Patreon funded only. I'm not trying to neglect my other fans, I'm really not, but my top tier paid request list is really long at this point. I know I say this in every Q&A, but it's going to take me like a year to get through it, and I just don't want to keep them waiting anymore. They're paying so much money for this, and it's supporting my life, it's supporting my job. So I really feel I have to commit to the Patreon sponsors reviews for a bit. So if you're willing to pay for each and every one of the Bond books, or just your favourites, then by all means I'll add them to the list, but otherwise, yeah, just going forward, I'm not going to be taking on any suggestions from non-patrons, just out of necessity.
Would you consider doing a review of a video game adaptation of a book, i.e. Metro, Witcher, a non-official video game adaptation of The Name of the Rose, etc.?
As it happens, I'm actually super overdue to do an episode on Metro. I read the book, but getting like everything sorted for the video game side of things, like the game capture and all that stuff, and how to structure the review based around a video game and what to take into account and stuff, has just been so mind-bogglingly hard for me that I've had to like delay it and put it on the back burner so many times. Fortunately, the patron who asked for it has been remarkably patient about it, but so what I may either do is say no more video games after I finish that, or I'll say it has to be like the absolute top tier of Patreon, the slightly more expensive one, to try and minimize how many times I do it, because it's just kind of outside of my wheelhouse, and in order to make sure people get their money's worth out of it, it's just taking a lot more effort from me to get through, and I just don't have the time to commit to a project like that at the moment. But yeah, so you can definitely expect to see that at some point soon. After that, we'll see.
What is your favorite kind of chocolate?
I'm not big into chocolate, to be honest. Even before I got terrible acid reflux, it wasn't really my favorite thing. It just makes me super thirsty for some reason.
What's a book that had an absolutely awful adaptation/film that you think deserves a second chance that isn't currently in the works already?
The Sharp books still spring most readily to mind, because that low-budget TV adaptation they did was... I mean, Sean Bean was the only redeeming feature about it. Everything else was massively disappointing, so I'd really like to see that done better with a proper budget. I suppose you could also count Eragon. I've not made a secret out of the fact that I didn't really care for that book, but I still think it probably deserved better than what it got, so maybe a better adaptation might bring me around on the whole genre in that case, but well, we'll see. Let's see what else. Starship Troopers, if they did like a book-accurate adaptation of that, might be interesting. It's possibly not the best political climate for it, because the guy who wrote the book, as I believe I've mentioned in previous questions, was like a hardcore right-wing guy. So, a sort of pro-military, pro-government, anti-aliens, illegal or literal, probably wouldn't be the best thing to rank right now.
Other than 50 Shades, is there any book/movie series you wish had not read or seen?
I'm not, without going back through my playlists, I'm not sure. I can't think off the top of my head of any others that I really, really hated. There's some that I certainly wouldn't have sought out for myself if I wasn't being paid to do so, but it takes a lot for me to actually regret reading it, because even reading a bad thing can be an experience, you know, it could be something you can learn from personally, or something you can pick up on something that might be helpful in future reviews and stuff, or it can, you know, just the fact that it makes a good episode can be quite rewarding. So I can't really think of anything else other than 50 Shades off the top of my head that I would gladly go back into the past and erase from existence.
If you were suddenly a director and could only make one film, which had to be an adaptation of a book, whether that book had already been adapted or not, what would it be?
I guess it does depend quite a lot on if in this scenario I'm also a talented director, because I've never directed anything before in my life, so if it was just me with my regular skill set, I'd have no fucking idea what I was doing, so I'd probably pick something that's like super obscure so no one would hate me for fucking it up. If there's some magical imbuement of directorial skill, I'd aim for something a bit more grandiose, like, I don't know, let's see. I'm struggling to remember the name of the book, so I'll try and throw it up on screen if I can track it down, but it's about an alternative history where agents from the future go back in time and influence the ancient past, and specifically the period where Belisarius is kicking around in the new Roman Empire in Constantinople, and they manipulate it so Rome has to end up teaming up with Persia to fight the Indian Empire, which is obviously something that never actually happened in history, and that's, you know, it's a really interesting series of books which I think would make a good adaptation. Other than that, it's all the things I've mentioned before, the Vorkosigan novels, the Sharp books, all that jazz. Sorry, if you're hearing stuff right now, there's a bunch of douche bros loudly fixing a car right outside my window. It's most inconvenient. Have you read the other Alex Ryder books? If not, you should. I haven't, and I think the ship has sailed on me doing so, to be honest. They're not quite Percy Jackson level, i.e. designed for kids, but adults can enjoy. I think you do have to be in the age demographic to enjoy them. I'm sure people will disagree with me, but for me personally, I don't have any particular desire to track down the rest of them. I hear that they do get better, or at least find their own thing somewhat beyond just being a Bond ripoff in later novels, but I'm not that interested in finding out if I'm completely honest, sorry.
Random question, I know. But if you play open world games, do you prefer when the main story is written to accept that you're going to fuck around with side stuff, or do you prefer a more focused narrative?
Definitely the latter. I don't like feeling too railroaded in an open world game because, what's the sodding point of it being open world otherwise? I do like there to be a good story, but I also want the option to wander off and go and save a farm from a bunch of goblins and some shit like that. Skyrim is definitely one of my all-time favourite games. I know that's such a mainstream option to choose these days, but who doesn't love Skyrim?
Are you going to do more Dom reviews soon?
As I believe I've already said, unless I don't use that take, I am going to do more, but I can't promise when, and it probably won't be soon. I'm doing like one every couple of months maybe at this point.
Is there any particular anime you like to watch or would recommend?
Again, I think this is a repeat question. I'm gonna level with you could probably tell by the shirt change, but I'm doing this spread out over a few days, but My Hero Academia and Food Wars are my current two ones that I'm watching, the modern ones that I'm watching at the moment. And I tried watching this one called Golden Conway, which is a sort of a period piece. I think it's just after the Second World War, possibly the first, set in Japan, where a guy is trying to track down this big hidden gold thing, and he teams up with like a local native or something, and it's okay, but it's trying to be food porn, but what they're eating is really disgusting stuff like bear liver or squirrel brains and shit. And I was not into it. So I know this was a question about what you would recommend, and I'm talking about one that I wouldn't, but I just felt I had to share that story.
Which of the following adaptation YouTubers do you prefer? Crimson Rogue, Jamie Tudd, Matt the Band Geek, or Kaitana Films?
To be completely honest with you guys, I don't watch any other adaptation reviewers. Like, not those guys are not, like, What's the Difference, the really big one. Not because I have any problem with them, or because I don't like having rivals, just because I live in fear of cross-contamination. I really worry that I'm going to see something in a review of theirs that I'm then going to cover the same adaptation and be stuck in a position where I don't know if I would have noticed that myself without having seen them notice it, or that I'd want to make the same joke and I wouldn't be able to have plausible deniability that I didn't copy them. Not necessarily with my audience, because I think they would give me the benefit of the doubt, but with myself, most of all, that I want to be able to say to myself that I didn't know that they said that first or noticed that first or anything like that. So I really couldn't say which one I prefer. Me and James Tood, I think you say his name, I think we spoke a while ago, and he seemed like a good bloke, but as I said, I just don't watch anyone's stuff, and I don't recognize any of the other names he just said, but again, my memory is just terrible, like just the worst, so it's possible I may have come across them or someone may have recommended them to me in the past and I've just forgotten. So just in case any of them are watching, I'm sure you guys are really, really great. As I said, I can't risk, for the sake of my own sanity, questioning my own reviews when I make them. So that's why I couldn't say which one of those guys I prefer, because I haven't seen any of their stuff.
Apart from $20 patrons, what criteria induce you to take on a specific LIA, or say to maybe do it sooner than suggested by the list you probably keep?
Yes, no, I believe we've touched upon this before. Apologies, but there's nothing that's going to convince me to move a non-paid-for request up the list at this point. And as I said, it's desperately not because I want to neglect my other fans or make them feel like they're less important to me just because they can't afford to support me on Patreon. It is just because I feel like I do have a responsibility to the people who are helping to pay my bills. So I'm so sorry to everyone who desperately wants me to do an adaptation of their choice, but just can't be a patron right now. I feel this is something I have to do for the foreseeable future.
What traits of a written work do you think make it easier or harder to adapt? Is there any work you feel is ideal for adaptation that hasn't been, or has elements that make adaptation impossible?
I think we're getting into repeat questions here, but I kind of challenged myself to answer every single one of these, so if I start saying the same thing over and over again, I do apologize. It's definitely giant, great big grandiose things that are going to be the hardest problem, just because you've got to recreate that visually. That's going to take a shit ton of CGI or a shit ton of actors. Like, it's easy to say, like, using the Sharp novels as an example, Bernard Cornwell can very easily write 10,000 French cavalry come riding over the hill, But the guys who made that had to get horses and men to ride them, so that's why they ended up having 5 cavalry that came riding over the hill, and the Battle of Waterloo was embarrassingly small. It's not impossible though, nothing is impossible with the kind of technology we have now. You just gotta have the gumption and the money. You gotta have a shit ton of money to make it happen, so that's why we're all kind of, like, when it comes to adaptions of, like, big, grandiose novels and stuff, we are kind of all at Hollywood's mercy, because they're the only guys who are going to be able to front the moolah to make that shit happen in a way that does it justice. It's just, I mean, you know, I like independent films as much as the next guy. I like it when there's a passion project, but if you're trying to adapt some sort of high fantasy or high science fiction, you're just not going to be able to pull it off, I'm sorry.
How many times do your sweet kitties interrupt your recording sessions? Estimations are acceptable. Smiley face.
You know, last week I would have said too much. However, with this particular book, I've not minded the interruptions at all. In fact, when I was reading it, I think the cats sensed my distress and they came to come and be cute and sit in my lap and stuff, which was most appreciated. Or if I was on a really bad chapter, I'd just go and spend some time with them. And so it's made this particular book way more bearable than the last 2 because I had kitty support. So I can't speak ill of them right now. If you were to ask me this question in like a month or so, I'd be like, 50 times an episode. Make them stop, but yeah, right now they're welcome.
At this point, how much reading are you able to do outside of LIA?
Not a lot, if I'm completely honest. I sneak in the occasional short story here and there if I'm on like a long journey or something, but reading just for myself has become a thing of the past since I started doing this full time, and that's honestly okay because, first of all, it's even if it was a big problem, it would be a worthy sacrifice to be able to do this job full time because I love this job so much. But also, I'm not enjoying the books that I read for, Lost in Adaptation. The ones that people recommend to me are often really, really good. So I may not be reading strictly just in my leisure, but reading is still just as fun. So it feels, I don't like miss book reading time because I am still reading. I'm just not reading ones that I wouldn't necessarily have picked. And more often than not, that results in me finding a book that I wouldn't otherwise have found and I really enjoy. So yeah, it's all good.
Hey Dom, much in the style of Into the Spider-Verse, are there any adaptations you can think of that may have worked a lot better with a stylized animated approach rather than live action? Personally, I like imagining an animated Harry Potter series in a similar vein to the Netflix Castlevania or Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Harry Potter is not an example I would have picked. I mean, Scott Pilgrim is the obvious answer, but honestly, I think a cartoon might be too similar to the comic books to even be worth doing. That would end up in a situation where someone's likely to have seen the cartoon but not read the comics and vice versa, because there's not a lot of point doing both. Like, from what I've seen, a lot of the manga anime community is like that, where you not necessarily have read the manga because quite a lot of the time it sticks to it too faithfully for there to be much point. The art style will be the same, the storyline will be the same. So I'm going off on a tangent here. Sometimes you just have to do things live action and calm it the shit down a bit. Animating it is an easier way out sometimes, unless that was the plan. And if you wanted to make an animated production, that's fine, but if you're doing it just because you're scared of trying to adapt something into live action, I think that would be a mistake. Did any of that make any sense?
Will we ever get audio commentary for the Battle of the Five Armies, LIA?
Yeah, at some point. I mean, I know we did the last 2, like, right next to each other. We probably shouldn't have done, but we're going to give it a few more months till we're further away from it and then do some nostalgia look back. Or at least that will be the intention. With the last 2, we barely talked about our episode at all. We just reaffirmed some of our thoughts on the actual adaptation itself and how disappointed we were. So, yeah, we'll probably just do that again at some point, but I'm not in any mad rush. I mostly did that as filler because I'd felt I'd gone too long since I uploaded anything because I was working on a really big project at the time, which I forget what it was. I think it was actually The Hobbit that I was working on, and I was trying to remind people that was something I did.
I know you like the Sharp series by Bernard Cornwell. Have you also read the Uhtred saga? / seen the show The Last Kingdom that is based on it?
And back to Sharp again. I can't seem to escape Bernard Cornwell in this particular Q&A. I've not. I do own them all. I'm saving them for a special occasion because, as I just mentioned, I don't have a lot of time for personal reading anymore. But it comforts me to know that they are there, and an author who I like so much is readily available to me if I'm in a bad spot. So So yeah, I'm not, but again, very much on the to-do list.
Do you have a favorite and least favorite director?
I don't really have a least favorite. I'm not one of those online critics who has to go and see all the new releases, so they develop a distaste for a particular director or another. Because if I don't like a film, I didn't like that film. I'm not going to necessarily blame the director for it, and if I really didn't like it, I just won't go and see any of his future work. So I never really build up any particular negative feelings towards any one director. I'm not trying to prove I'm like the super positive guy. It's just it's my job is just lets me avoid that. As for favourites, huge fan of Joss Whedon, huge fan of Edgar Wright. Let's see, I'm blanking on any others right now. I'm really shit. I'd make a really shit film critic. I'm so glad that I mixed in books there, so I don't look like a complete idiot in every episode. Having
recently started reading the Discworld books again, I got to wondering if you'd ever consider doing something Discworld related. Not like a LIA, nor even a review. They are all of them really good, so there's no need to repeat that 41 times. But perhaps a fairly comprehensive beginner's guide. This is not really a request for an episode. I'd just really like to hear you talk Pratchett.
I'm considering it, but I'm still kind of torn up about his death, to be honest. I know it's been a few years now, but I just get so super sad whenever I approach the subject. So, I'm sure I'll do it at some point soon. It's just, I guess it's just too soon, sorry.
Pros and cons of living in the USA over living in the UK?
Pros, carpool lanes and garbage disposals. I don't know how I lived without those before coming here. Cons, no healthcare. Okay, y'all need to sort that backward shit out, because I cannot believe that you guys are like the richest country in the world and you're not taking care of your sick. Get on that.
What are your tattoos of? Can you share them?
The one and only tattoo I have is on my calf, and it's supposedly the arming sword that Richard the Lionheart took into battle. I don't have any particular affinity for Richard the Lionheart, but I just really, really like swords. I mean, that may come as a shock to you if you've been following me for a while, but yes, they are my personal obsession. So, when it came to picking a tattoo, that was the logical thing to get.
What do you miss most about living in England? What's your favorite new thing about living in LA?
I think the thing I miss the most about the UK is British pubs. Americans have bars and they have restaurants, but they don't have quite that space in between where pubs exist. I'm kind of a basic bitch, so I was quite fond of Wetherspoons, which is this big chain in Britain. I imagine most of my British audience going, ugh, Dom, at this point. As for advantages to LA, the weather is an obvious answer. I don't miss being cold all the time. I do miss the rain sometimes, but, overall, much nicer just being able to wear t-shirts all year round. And, another weird thing is, I get a big kick out of when, celebrities, A-list celebrities, tweet about the same things as me, like the weather or the traffic. And I was like, aha, yes, I feel you, Stephen Fry. You and me both, buddy.
Are there any places in England you recommend visiting, aside from London? I'm planning on traveling there and would love suggestions.
There's a place called Bath that's not far from London, which I hear is quite good for tourists. I've never been there myself, but I'm told it's quite nice. If you're prepared to drive north for a few hours, I'm quite fond of York, which is in Yorkshire, strangely enough. It's quite an old city, so a lot of history going on there, and it's quite a charming place. So if you're looking to absorb a lot of very sort of British culture. If you're not looking to travel that far and you are starting in London, you might try heading directly south until you get to Portsmouth. It's a coastal town where a lot of the ye olde dockyards were, so there's a lot of very interesting historical stuff there. It's also quite picturesque. And I mean, if you stay further south, you've got a slightly better chance of getting nice weather, but it's certainly not guaranteed in England. And again, if you're not afraid of travelling on by the train or by road for a few hours, Wales is also a really nice place to visit. It's right next to England. And there's a town right at the north end of it called Conway that I've always enjoyed spending time in. It's got a really big castle.
Have you read the Warrior Cat series?
I have not.
What are 2 things you wish the US had that you did back in England? And if you could bring 2 things from the US that England doesn't have, what would they be?
Good lord, this is like a thought exercise. You know what's weird? I kind of miss Doritos hot salsa, which is something apparently you can only get in the UK. I didn't realise this till after I got to the US. I probably can't eat it right now anyway, because I've got really bad GERD. But yeah, I can't really think of anything else. Hang on. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm really struggling to think of anything. There's quite a lot of like British beer, or European beer to be more precise, that I wish you guys sold. Because American beer's not so good. I'm sorry to break it to you guys. Other than that, I said there's a few cultural differences between the UK and the US, but fundamentally they're pretty fucking similar countries. It's almost like you guys were a colony at one point. So I'm struggling to think of any like products or something that I really miss from over there that you don't have here, or vice versa.
Do you anticipate the creation/implementation of more original characters in the same vein as Terrance in the near future?
Well, anticipate certainly not, because I don't plan that far ahead. I don't think I could honestly top Terrance, and I think it would be a mistake to try to go into it trying to think, okay, what's going to be the next Terrance character? Because I got really lucky with him, because I really wasn't expecting him to be popular in any way. I thought he'd just sort of stick around for the Harry Potter-a-thon, but a surprising amount of people wanted to keep him around, and he just seemed to resonate with some people. I think because he was such a douchebag, it just made him an interesting character. So if there's a situation where I feel I can bring in a new character, maybe, but it's not really where my channel's heading at the moment. I'm not doing storylines, I'm not really doing that many sketches anymore. So unless I'm going to do something big and I feel that I need to try and bring in another perspective onto even an artificial other perspective, I don't think I'll be doing anything anytime soon like that.
As a fellow dyslexic, I've wondered how you read so many books so quickly. I know you use audiobooks, but they still cause issues for many dyslexics. Do they not affect your type, or have you adapted tools to help you work around the issues?
It's a combination of me getting very, very lucky in that my particular type of dyslexia doesn't affect my reading too badly. Part of the reason why dyslexia is so hard to treat or to help people with is because everyone will be so radically affected by it differently. So in my case, my spelling is awful, but my reading is okay. What problems I did have with it, I was able to power through at a young age because I was just so determined to be a big reader like my father and big sister, and my whole family in fact were big readers, and I wanted in on that. So unfortunately I don't have any tips or tricks. If dyslexia is really fucking with you, you gotta try harder than everyone else, and it's just gonna be a massive pain in the ass. Sorry.
This may be a little off topic, but I'm so curious. If Terrance had to choose to live with a Slytherin or a Hufflepuff, which would he choose? Condolences if he's currently living with either. Winky face.
Slytherin all the way, yo. Those guys are a lot of fun to hang out with until the inevitable point when they try and betray you, but, little secret, they're not as smart as they think they are, so staying one step ahead of them isn't all that difficult.
I know anime is currently off the table, but what anime adaptations would you have liked to have done LAAs for?
Death Note's the main one. I would have liked to have looked to see how the manga compared to the anime and how both compared to the various live-action adaptations. I was thinking of doing a Dom Oscars for it at one point, because I do love Death Note. It was one of the best mangas I've ever read, and I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, I don't care, shut up. The anime was okay. I was fascinated by where they chose to end it and certain things that they chose to leave out. And then I was kind of disappointed with the first live-action pair of movies, and even though they had really good actors, and I thought the guys they had for Light and L were both really good, even if Light wasn't physically the best. I'm rambling again. So yeah, short answer, Death Note, but yes, definitely not going to happen because Japan will kill me if I touch their footage.
Do you remember the moment when books became more than words on paper to you? As an example, when I was 7, my mother made me read The Indian in the Cupboard, and it was the horse and cat scene. Trying to avoid spoilers in case you haven't read it, and it does have a movie based on it, so you may have to do an LAA on it someday. If you do remember the book and moment that affected you, please describe it.
That sounds like it would make a really good story to tell, but I honestly don't remember any particular moment like that. Books have had a profound effect on me as far back as I can remember. My father read me bedtime stories, since I was old enough to be aware of the world around me, and each and every one affected me in some way or another. I was never it's just a book. So I wept for every character who died. I rejoiced when they succeeded. I wish I could say there was one big lightning bolt moment, but the books have always just been a part of me, I think.
If you could redo any 3 adaptations to get a better adaptation, which 3 would you pick?
Depends what you mean by better. More accurate. I might be tempted to say Neverending Story, not because I feel there's anything wrong with that movie, please don't kill me, just because it might be interesting to see the second half of the book, where Bastian goes mad with power and everybody dies horribly. So yeah, that would probably be one of the ones on my list, if that's what you mean by, you know, make it better. I'm going to stop coming back to Sharp over and over again because I'm just realizing now, because I reread one of those short stories recently, I think it's just on my mind, which is why all the questions seem to lead back to it. I mean, I was genuinely disappointed with that TV show and wish they would do a big budget TV, movie series on it. But let me try and think of some other answers just for this question. Okay, again, working on the assumption that you mean more accurate to the book, I would be really tempted to try and get them to remake Who Framed Roger Rabbit, just so, I mean, if I went to see this in cinemas, I wouldn't face the screen, I'd face the audience, I'd sneak down to the front under like a cloak or something, because I just would love to see everyone freaking out when they go in expecting, like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and end up getting Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, you know? Sorry, no, that's the sequel. Who Censored Roger Rabbit is what I'm talking about. I'm trying to think of a third one. You know, Ella Enchanted, I think, needs a second pass. I know a lot of people like that movie, and I wouldn't want them to, like, erase the first installment, but it's just not the book. The book is just, I think, a lot more charming and a lot more clever, and the film is, it's desperately trying to be Shrek, it's desperately trying to be a goofy comedy and slapstick, and it's just not the book. So I wouldn't mind a reboot of that at some point that's more accurate to the book, because I think people would like that. I think if you were to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they would like something a bit more intelligent, I think they would really enjoy a more accurate adaptation of the book, but you never know. Actually, this is going to be a silly answer, but I'm going to predict in the future if George R. R. Martin finishes off the last Song of Ice and Fire books, I'm going to predict that everyone's going to want them to remake, like, season 6 onwards to be more accurate to the books, which obviously isn't going to be possible, but we'll have to reboot the whole thing, which they'll probably do at some point. They're probably going to try and make movies out of it, but yeah. So I'm going to say that future Dom is going to want a Game of Thrones reboot just to get it back to its roots, because the last couple of seasons, you guys know what I'm talking about. And that's a wrap. If you are a patron and I somehow missed or forgot or couldn't do your question, I'm so sorry. I did try to do as many as possible, but sometimes I lose or forget things, or they just weren't quite appropriate for this particular Q&A. And yeah, I guess this means I have to get back to my other project now. Wish me luck. Hello again, my beautiful watchers. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick reminder that there's a wonderful website called Patreon that's been allowing online producers to actually make a living doing what they do, since apparently YouTube's decided that they shouldn't anymore. Basically, they offer the chance to pledge a certain amount of money per month or per video in exchange for various rewards offered by the creator. There's a variety of stuff you can earn by becoming one of my patrons, including early access to all videos and taking part in that survey you see at the start of every Lost in Adaptation episode. That's actually a very important part of the process, as I use it to gauge how much I'm going to need to explain about the book and the film before I start comparing them. If you decide to become a higher level contributor, your name will be added to the credits that you're seeing right now, and you'll be given the option to join my private chat room so you can regularly talk with me and other patrons. If you're keen enough to join the topmost tier of patronage, you'll earn the most coveted of all the rewards, the chance to pick a future adaptation to be reviewed by yours truly. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that, for I have no money left after building a personal fortress to prepare for the coming zombie apocalypse. Do you have any idea how expensive a lifetime supply of food, water, and ammunition is? Fear not, it would still be a huge help to me if you were to give that like button the old clickaroo, share this episode on social media with perhaps a little recommendation to your friends to check it out, and subscribe if you've not already. It really helps my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. I hope you have a most pleasant day, and I will see you in the next episode. Actually, you know one advantage America has over Britain? No gun control. No, but seriously, that is actually a really, really serious problem you need to sort out soon.